understand why.
His subject matter sometimes was extraordinarily tough, and I thought that that was probably an area that would be best undertaken by other galleries. But I decided years ago that no, that wasn't the way it was going to be. He was going to come here. And so finally, towards the end of last year, he said, please come to my studio. And that was hanging in his studio. And I sat down in front of it, as I still do, with the three here. And I was rendered a bit speechless.
Wow.
And I said, I get it completely why you need to show in this building. He wanted to show in Circa. Circa is this curvaceous structure. It's really good for showing powerful objects. It concentrates energy on central objects or on big pictures.
Why feature this particular art?
Well, I think that art, not only what we perceive as being or call contemporary art or modern art is a window into the soul of any nation or culture. If you look at the ancient Greeks, we know how they felt, and we know what their aspirations are through their art. The same as with the Egyptians. We know more about the Egyptians through the art that they created by far than any other medium. And all the way through the Renaissance, we know about the tragedies that befell nations, such as the demise of Spain as a world power because of the artists like Goya, El Greco, Velasquez. We know what it was like to be a French person in the court of Louis XIV through the art of the era. Art is more than decor. Art is a very clear window into what the people feel about their country, whether it's a sense of confusion, whether it's confidence, a sense of pleasure, all of the above shows in the art, and in our day, the contemporary art of South Africa.
In your opinion, why is it important that spaces like this exist?
This is a special building, and we're very careful about the program here. It's not a factory where we have short shows and lots of them. The exhibition's on for a long time here, and we try and have it as a distilled collection of what we perceive as being the front rank painters and sculptors of this era in South Africa.
لما يحقق أحلام ليلة السفر قعدنا نتكلم بالساعات قالوا لي بصوا قدامك ما تبصش للي فات
mini Allah uwe na imani nyingine falyastajibu li na wewe pia umuitikie Mwenyezi Mungu. Kumuitikia Mungu ni vipi? Ni wewe utende matendo mema aliyokuamrisha Allah na uache haramu. Isiwe unaomba dua kumbe unakula chakula cha haramu.
Baadhi ya masharti haya ni kama kumcha Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, kuepukana na makatazo ya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, na kumtegemea yeye peke yake, kumpwekesha katika ibada zako zote kama Muislamu.
It means he has been making a fool of me while showing me the face of a righteous and respectable man. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, that's right.
What do you want? Hey, where do you think you're going? Las Bandidas.
Nimetamani sana kuzungumza naye, Yaani siku hizi dadia anakufungia kweli.
Hebu jieleze kwa sababu mimi sina muda wa kupiga mahesabu nikajua hicho unachokizungumzia.
I think this time we should run.
Lakini ndio kama mmeshirikiana na huyo kesi, tahadhari sana. Manake kimotoni.
Watakaje Kate? Huu karibu wako wewe na Dingu umelitona nini haswa?
It is indeed the 4th day of July 2023. Good morning on this chilly Tuesday morning. Welcome to KBC News Check, a program that we have earmarked to ensure that we keep you afloat with all the latest happening in the country, and especially now. If you look at all the dailies, you will see that the news making headlines in regards to the 50 CASs. The High Court yesterday, a 3-judge bench announced and said that the 50 positions are unconstitutional. They are not enshrined in any law of the land, and so that is null and void. But they have vowed to make an appeal, and that is more or less what will form basis of our discussion today. But there are a number of things that also touching on the nation. Looking at also tomorrow, we will also be heading to the court. You do remember that Okia Omtata had challenged, the Busia senator had challenged the Finance Act, and the court had given stay orders where they said that until the cases had determined, well, the Finance Act cannot start to be used 4 days into the new month, into the new calendar. And also we are also keen on looking at the Sabasaba maandamanos, if you like, by the Azimio One Kenya coalition after Baba announced that they will be having the biggest, actually talked about an earthquake of a protest in regards to the taxes and the Finance Act. We will be talking about that as well. Welcome. My name is Njue, and Ann Wangeshi is our sign language interpreter for this live program. And I'll be introducing my panelists very soon. But before that, first of all, let's have a recap of what happened at the High Court after the 3-judge bench announced that they declared the appointment of the 50 cabinet administrative secretaries unconstitutional in a majority decision by a 3-judge bench. The court held that the creation of the position of CAS and had failed the public participation dictates of the Constitution and was therefore null and void. The ruling was based on a petition filed by the Law Society of Kenya and Katiba Institute challenging the appointment to the office made in March of 2023 by the head of state, President William Ruto. Let's have that.
Lies with the Court of Appeal after the High Court ruled the appointments were unconstitutional.
The newly created office and fresh complement of 50 had to comply with the Constitution and the criteria set out earlier in Okia's case in order to be lawfully established. They did not comply. For the avoidance of doubt, the entire complement of 50 CASs is therefore unconstitutional.
In a 3-hour judgment by a majority, the 3-judge bench held the appointment had failed the provisions of public participation, principle of the Constitution. The judges further held that the Public Service Commission erred by ignoring to seek advice from the Salaries and Remuneration Commission in determining the pay grade of the created positions.
It is therefore clear to us that the fifth respondent should have consulted the SRC in order for it to ascertain the resultant financial implications. It is our considered view that based on the separation of powers doctrine, budgetary concerns fall within the realm of policy and rightly belong to the other relevant arms of government as may be appropriate. We thus decline the invitation to delve any deeper into that arena.
The court went ahead to state that the position had been scrapped in 2022 and therefore new appointments was based on the 23 positions created by the fourth president, which had ceased to exist.
That the same is an unrelated course of action within the context of the consolidated petition. The petitioner is, however, at liberty to raise the issue as a separate course of action should it wish to pursue the same.
In a landmark decision on a petition by the Law Society of Kenya and Katiba Institute challenging the legality of the position, two judges Kani Kimondo and Alim Visram held that given that there was a sort of public participation in the creation of the 23 CSS positions, it cannot shoulder the addition 27 position and that 50 individuals cannot deputize the 22 cabinet secretaries.
Diversity of roles as that of principal secretary, contrary to the principles of public finance. C, an order that the said advert of 21st September 2022 be declared a nullity as it fails to provide crucial information that enables the public to make informed contributions in the establishment of the office of CAS.
The 50 CSS were appointed in March but stopped by the Labour Relations Court and barred from drawing any salaries until a case that had been lodged is determined.
That's what exactly happened yesterday at the Milimani Law Courts after that three-judge bench declared the positions null and void. Well, we will be breaking down the judgment, but following the judgment that rendered the Chief Administrative Secretary post as non-existent, the respondents have vowed to head to the Court of Appeal to seek a reprieve. However, the petitioners in the case led by Law Society of Kenya President Eric Theuri have termed the judgment as a landmark decision that has affirmed the supremacy of the Constitution.
That has elicited mixed reactions among Kenyans, with a section saying that it is a step towards reducing the burden on the common mwananchi.
What is important in this decision is the affirmation that within the judicial system of this country, what reigns supreme is the Constitution of Kenya and the supremacy of the Kenyan people. When an exercise is held of public participation and the overwhelming view of the citizens is that an office is unnecessary, that should count for something.
13 million youths are out of employment, according to the World Bank. So, we salute our judicial system today. Bravo and keep it up.
Ilikuwa mzigo kwa Wakenya. Tunatarajia mzigo ikuwe nyepesi kwa Wakenya, sio kuongezewa.
Kama Monica Mbaru hangekubaliana kwamba PSC ilikuwa imefanya kazi nzuri ya kuadvertise, tungeenda interview. Lakini hapa hawa wameenda wamebadilisha. Tunasema hivi, sisi ni Wakenya kama wale wengine. Sisi pia tuna haki ya kushiriki katika mambo ya kitaifa. Tutakwenda katika mahakama ya rufaa na tuna uhakika, we are very convinced that we will be successful.
We have two separate decisions that are competing, a decision made in the Employment and Labor Relations Court and a decision made here, which conflict on the constitutionality of the office of the CS. So we are going to take, we are going to study very carefully the decision that was made today with a view to moving to the Court of Appeal.
Let there be no doubt that the CS's, the position is as constitutional as they can.
Very well, that's just some reactions from the leaders who have vowed to appeal that at the Court of Appeal. But before we even delve into this discussion, let's first of all go to the Karen Green Estates, where environmental conservationists have expressed concerns, and currently speaking is Isaac Kalua Daktari. Let's first of all listen in.
Forest materials from other countries because they protected their areas. Trees rotted there. That bacterial activity that led to growth of more trees is why we have much more. And if our parents, if our great parents, if our forefathers protected our forests, then we would be in the same level with other countries at 70%. Then we would not have a problem in harvesting the trees for livelihood. There are alternatives that people living in El Bag.
We do apologize for that technical hitch, but who was speaking was Isaac Kalua, Dr. Isaac Kalua of the GTAP party, who was speaking in regards to the lifting of the logging ban by President William Ruto, who did that while at a Sunday service on Sunday in Molo, Nakuru County. And of course, that they are expressing concerns in regards to how we are looking at the environment conservation. And when we talk about logging, we know what happens in the country when it comes to logging. The tree cover suffers the most, but we'll be getting that information a little bit later and also in our subsequent bulletin. Just in case you joined us, just starting KBC News Check, and today we are looking at the state of the nation, and more specifically, if you look at the dust hasn't settled on the CASs after the High Court declared that post as unconstitutional. Allow me now to introduce one of my guests who has already arrived in studio, Honorable Abraham Kirwa. Honorable Abraham Kirwa is the MP for Mosop, and also he is a member of the Housing Committee and also the Public Debt and also presentation of the National Assembly. Karibu sana Mheshimiwa.
Asante sana. Thank you, Ben, for this opportunity to be here today at the studio. It's indeed a great day, and of course a day with a lot of mixed emotions as we are really looking into what happened with this appointment of the CAS.
Yes.
I know for sure many people have a lot of questions. How did it become unconstitutional? How did we get here in the first place? But I want to assure you that, like as mentioned, they are going to appeal. The three judges who ruled 2-1 that it was unconstitutional, I want to believe that some way, somehow, these positions are going to come back.
All right. Mheshimiwa, I would like you to just give us a feel of the emotions involved, because it's a good thing that you've talked about, you guys are going to appeal. And last year, the High Court had declared the positions as unconstitutional, you see. And talking about public participation, they've said that for the first 23 positions that were there already, there was some level of public participation, but for the 27 positions there was no public participation, and declared all the 50 posts as unconstitutional. What exactly are you going to based on your appeal?
Yeah, Ben, I think that is the real matter, really. I think the judges, they concentrated much more on public participation. They said on the 23 appointees, the public participation some way somehow took place, and that was okay. The extra 27 is where they have an issue.
All right, hold the thought, Mheshimiwa. Let's first of all go back to the Karen Green Estate, where Isaac Kalua has been making a statement in regards to the President Directive of logging. Let's first of all listen in.
Because someone was given a license, got into a forest within a community that had protected the forest, so that person and that company, that institution cleared the trees and left, and then the community went berserk. And they said, we cannot have protected this forest with what we have been told previously, and then other people are the beneficiaries of this. They invaded the forest. In 3 months, the entire forest was clear. Clean shave. Isn't this, you just need one loose nut. You just need one person to declare or share information that is wrong around this community, and you find the entire place being invaded in a way that you can never. Today we are still suffering out of Chepalungu forest because of such activities. Is it not in Shimba Hills that plantation forest was established? And soon after, because of the conflict between Kenya Forest Service and Kenya Wildlife Service, animals since created that as an habitation for themselves, and they changed the place. More water was found, and the trees are still standing today, and the place is as it should be, even though the trees were actually the trees that were meant for plantation forest. They were allowed to rot, and today you can get there and find a situation that is totally different, that enables our country to progress. I therefore release this with a lot of joy in our hearts, having contacted and worked with the team members, and I thank them for the work that they have done overnight since this statement was made, and those members of our party that are out of the country and other political parties that we are partnering with, including the leading party. We want to be able to be counted to have done what is good for posterity. Thank you very much. In one clear, probably in a minute, should the president rethink this in no uncertain terms, just going straight to it, and what the president said, because he was very clear, and he said that these trees will be bringing money very soon to people who are planting them, and he even insinuated that he has already planted his. What is your clear message in one now that you've given us all the time?
That has been, beg your pardon, that has been the Green Thinking Action Party, Dr. Isaac Kalua, raising concerns in regards to the presidential directive to resume logging in forest, and some of the things that he has mentioned in that they have issues in the protection and management of forest, concerns that people being given the green light to enter into the forest and start logging will bring about a big challenge, giving there an example of 3 months alone are enough to desecrate a lot of forest and a lot of trees in the country. We will be getting more details in regards to that. My colleague Timothy Kipnusu is keeping a keen eye on that. And let's go back to our topic of discussion. And before we even go back to what we were discussing, Mheshimiwa, looking at what Kalua is talking about is raising some very pertinent concerns in regards to the forest cover, and now we're talking about the climate change and all this. We will be having the summit right here in the country in the coming month. You were in that church service on Sunday when the president in Molo talked about, yes, we are going to be giving the green light to start logging. I would like to pick your mind on that.
Yeah, Ben, I think what Kalua here is alluding to for sure. I mean, all of us, we are very concerned with the issue of the climate change. Many countries have gone through a lot of challenges because of the climate change, because of deforestation. And if there is anybody who is very keen and is on the front line in defending the issues of the climate change, is the president. His Excellency the President is one champion that is pushing for a lot of trees. In fact, he is talking of 10 million trees to be planted in the next several months to years. So the president, what he alluded to on Sunday in lifting up this moratorium, which has been there for the last 6 years, is that there are several trees that are now mature for harvesting. You know, in the forest, of course, there are so many trees, but there are those which are mature and ready for harvesting. There are trees that needed to be planted. There are areas that needs to be protected. So it is not that he said that all forest will be, is opening all forests for logging. What the president meant is we want to identify now the regions that has enough trees that is mature enough for harvesting, so that we have enough also timber, so that we are not going out of the country to go and import trees from outside. So what Kalua is trying to do is just doing a blanket condemnation on this lifting by the president, but the president was very clear and is very clear in making sure that Kenya is on the front line in, first of all, protecting the forest, which we are going to continue to do so, is making sure that, you know, is involving the military, is involving the the common man, everybody to come out and plant trees, which is going to help us quite a bit on this issue of climate change. But at the same time, we cannot continue to leave the trees to continue rotting, which were ready for harvesting, and then now, they'll rot and then we are saying we don't have enough trees for timber. So there is going to be a way that we are going to identify which forest now is mature enough for harvesting, which areas needs to be. But you mentioned a forest in Kericho somewhere that they just came and they just demolished the whole forest, which there are some bad eggs in a basket, and those are very secluded areas. But I want to assure you that the president is not one of these people who is saying we are going to make sure that all logging is happening in almost every forest. No, it is going to be selected areas. It is going to be those areas which has enough trees that has matured and ready for harvesting. Kenya has a lot of forest, but also there's quite a bit that has already been destroyed. But I want to assure you that moving forward, and I know the president is very keen to make sure that as long as we are also protecting the forest, we are also allowing those mature trees that are ready to be harvested.
But Mheshimiwa, also looking at what he said, a couple of years back, he was very protective of the forest. But those trees could not be ready in the last 2-3 years to allow people to go back into the forest and start logging. And another thing, Mheshimiwa, you know very well that Kenyans, if we are given just a small leeway, a lot of people could take advantage of this and we could be back to zero where we were.
And I agree with you. Some people, you just give them a few yards, they take a whole acre of land or several acres of land. It's true that there will always be people like that who will take advantage of the opportunity that has been given. But I want to assure you that the president and his government and the ministry is going to be very careful. And I know the CS of the ministry, Soya, Twiba, is going to be very careful even as we open up and as we allow the people. Remember there are people that they'd already paid, that they'd received the licensing and the permission to go logging. And then we stopped it because we needed the trees to mature, which by now, most of them are already matured. We are talking of 3 to 4 years now. Some of the trees are truly matured. And what we are saying is there are trees that are now rotting in the forest. Nobody's using it, and they are ready to be harvested. And those are the areas that we are really pointing out that the mature trees that are actually matured enough and ready to be harvested, we are going to go for those. But at the same time, we'll be very careful that we don't get bad apple that is going now to destroy the whole forest so that we end up with nothing. So we will, and echo the sentiments by the chairman that we need to be very careful, but we cannot also use a blanket condemnation that the whole forest in Kenya will be destroyed just because the president lifted the moratorium.
All right. Gentlemen, karibuni. We also have been joined by Gibson Nyamato Gisore, who is an advocate of the High Court and also a leadership and governance expert. Karibu sana, wakili.
Asante sana, Ben.
Now, let me just throw you into the deep end. Looking at what the 3-judge bench ruled yesterday in regards to the CAS position, as an advocate of the High Court, not even a governance expert, as an advocate of the High Court, I would like to pick your mind on your reactions to the 3-judge bench.
Thank you, Bentry, for giving me this opportunity to be on show today. I would want to say that this is yet another point where our judiciary has really put his foot on the ground and said that, our constitution is very clear, let's try and respect it. There was a time back in the Uhuru era when the same thing happened, but Uhuru was not known for obeying court orders. So I think he must have played that down. So we're waiting to see how the current president plays, because this is his first major court case, which has really directed that whatever decision he made is not in tandem with the constitution. So this is what we're going to gauge the president by in terms of respecting of court orders. So all I wish is that he actually tells those guys that it's my bad, I made a bad decision to appoint you, but then you see what the court has said, and maybe let's try and wait for other opportunities to come up. I understand it's a tight spot for the president to actually balance the interests of, because those people really supported him. Much as they supported him, he also needs to reward them with something, because he has done a very good job in terms of rewarding all the people who supported him. And this one side, he thought that maybe this could be the best fit for them, but constitutionally the court has said that that is not the way to go. So what we expect to see is what Kenyans and as the lawyers fraternity and the judiciary, what we expect is to see a president who respects court orders, and this will be the first place to start with.
I will toss the ball back to Mheshimiwa in regards to what you've just said, in regards to obeying of court orders. Let's just do a small flashback. Wakili has even mentioned that, yes, the former president was not known quite well in regards to obeying court orders. But let's look at the current president that we have. Yes. He must have been told, or he must be knowing, that the High Court last year did declare itself on the CAS's positions. That notwithstanding, he did appoint and actually made 27 additional from his predecessor. And still on obeying court orders, the court was very clear, I think on Thursday or Friday, in regards to the Finance Act, and suspended it until the case is heard and determined. But yet, EPRA, which is a government agency, we are still paying fuel at around almost 200 shillings. Some people are paying it at 200 shillings. There is an active court order which has not been obeyed, Mheshimiwa. And still on the same, let me load it, Mheshimiwa, and still on the same, even Parliament was unable to vet the CASs, but the president went ahead and appointed them. I'd like to pick your mind on that.
Thank you, Ben, for those few issues that you picked up. President William Samoei Ruto is one person who truly has respect for the rule of law. If there is anybody who has respect for the rule of law, is His Excellency. And I think he will. With this ruling yesterday by the 3 court judges of the Supreme Court, I think he's going to be very careful even as he responds to what to do next. And you have the lawyer saying that we are going to appeal. And that is how the process of the law works. You know, of course, the ruling comes, they appeal, there'll be a hearing, a decision will come, they'll reach into a final decision. But I think looking at the decision by the 3 judges yesterday, as much as they said it was unconstitutional, but really they were basing it on the public participation that the 23 appointed CASs, they went through public participation, that one was fine, but where they have an issue is the extra 27 that was added, but there was no public participation. And I want to believe that the president and his cabinet and also his administration is going to look into this ruling very carefully. They are going to have, as even before they do the appeal to the court, they will have reasons that I think it is going to be acceptable to the court. Because for president to appoint 50 of these CSS, he has reasons. And he knows that the CSS that we have will need help in making sure that his agenda will be implemented. But at the same time, it's not much about his rewarding people who supported him. You know, millions of people supported the president. We all know that. Millions of people really supported the president. But he appointed these few people for regional balance. I think that's one of the issues that also he considered. You know, he had to appoint some of these people because the CSS that we have are not enough. The PSS are not enough. But for the purposes of regional balance, the president had to do what he had to do to make sure that almost every region, every community is kind of represented in his cabinet, in his administration. So it is not that the president is going to just, look down and say, let's proceed on, continue in office, continue to be paid the salaries. No, this is a man who respects the rule of law, and I'm very sure he's going to respect this particular decision, and he's going to sit down with his advisors, and I guarantee you the next move the president is going to make everybody happy. I know for sure right now, the mood of the country, everybody is thinking now, why do we need these additional 50 CSS? Right now, we are talking that we don't have enough money in the country. Yes. Most of the youth are unemployed, which I understand it is the case. But these 50 will not have made any difference. Even if we say, okay, let all the 50 CSS not to be in office, it will not have made any difference. But for the purposes of regional balancing, for the purposes of executing his mandate, and what he actually promised his people and the people of Kenya, that this is the manifesto and this is what I'm going to accomplish. He appointed these people for that purpose. And I want to assure you, if there is one person who respects and obeys the rule of law, His Excellency the President.
All right. We will also be linking up with my colleague in Kisumu to just give us a feel of that. You've mentioned around 3 times that the president is one that you are 100% sure that he really loves to obey the rule of law. You guys were unable to vet the CASs, and the reason being this is not quite anchored in the Constitution. I think that should have been the first red flag, Mheshimiwa.
Ben,
Yes.
I understand it was not a red flag.
Yes.
The Parliament, yes, we did not vet because the process was still going on, and I think it will still happen. It will still happen at some point, but I want to assure you, as much as you're just, we say it's the ruling, of course, has come out and it says it's unconstitutional, and we abide by it. We want to appeal, but at the end of the day, we are going to reach out to a conclusion where it will be acceptable to both parties, the court, and also the people of Kenya. I can assure you.
All right. Let's first of all link up with my colleague Wycliffe Okech, who is in Kisumu, to just give us a feel of what people think or feel in regards to the CAS's decision yesterday at the High Court. And Wakili, as we wait for Wycliffe, he's talking about, we saw that Parliament was unable to vet that because they kind of looked at where to start and they were unable to do that. And still, the president went ahead and actually had them appointed. And something that even caught my eye, Gibson, is that they were sworn in. And the same judiciary that sworn them in is the one talking about unconstitutional, null and void. Is it a doublespeak?
It's not a doublespeak from the side of the judiciary, if I may come to their defense. You know, there are certain prerogative measures which you have been directed to do. Courtesy of something having happened, you just have to do that. But then, because we trust our process, we have gotten somebody who has gone to court and highlighted the same issues, and because it's the duty of the court to do that, which, if, for example, if the president has done something and it's your duty to do the next, you cannot say, no, we cannot say, and yet there's no existing court case, or there's nothing which stops, there's no bar to that effect. So you just have to do that, and then the checks and balances, because our constitution or any constitutional democracy works in a manner that we call like a 3-legged African stool, that this one has to stand here, this one has to stand here for you to actually be able to sit on it. If 2 only are standing, then you cannot. So the aspect of checks and balances is something which we need to entrench now in our day-to-day activities in terms of ensuring that democracy is upheld. So you cannot be able to stop if the president has indeed invited you to swear these people, or it's your duty to swear them. You cannot stop doing that. You will have to do your duty, and then someone else who is responsible for a certain section will be able to act in a manner is supposed to act to ensure that that particular action can be rescinded, because the checks and balances are of the effect that when an action which is barred from happening takes place, then it hinders, or for you to actually create those checks. The biggest problem, I would like to thank Mheshimiwa here for highlighting that indeed they were, and Njue for highlighting the fact that they were unable, because there was no provision of law. There was nowhere you could have started to vet these people, because the Constitution does not anticipate that. So that is the first checks and balance. The second, a president having appointed them, then it takes upon the parliament, or the parliament did their bit. It's now upon the judiciary to actually do their bit, which a petition, the judiciary does not act suo moto. It cannot stand and say, hey, that is very wrong, we are not going to do that. So because a petition has got to be presented before itself. It's the same as the thing to Parliament, like they cannot act on public participation on something which is not before the House.
Yep.
Somebody has got to present a petition, some member of Parliament like Mheshimiwa has got to come up with an issue and then highlight it. So that is how action is initiated in some of these three arms of government. So that has got to happen. And since people believe in the Constitution, they let that happen because they know, let it go on, but then somebody else has got to kick in and do their part.
Mheshimiwa, looking at the 50 CASs vis-a-vis what we had in the previous regime of 23 CASs, and the Kenya Kwanza government, when you came into power, you talked about austerity measures to ensure that we use our resources prudently and ensure that we do not sit on Wanjiku and Wanjiku has her voice, right?
Yes.
But now 50 CASs, up from 23. This is quite a huge number. And looking at the wage bill, I'm quite sure a lot of Kenyans will feel quite comfortable on what the courts did yesterday, because that could be an austerity measures, although it's from the judiciary.
Ben, I agree with you, of course. The sentiments and the feeling of the Kenyans, like I mentioned earlier, that they are feeling that, of course, creation of these 50 CASs, when we are going through a very huge financial struggle as a nation, should not have happened. But I want to assure you that the president knew that those issues are there. But also there was a need, like I mentioned earlier, that there was a need to appoint 50, not 23. 23, of course, had already, been approved through the public participation. But the reason, one of the reasons what the president must have looked at, like I mentioned earlier, is the making sure that there is representation in almost every part of this country, so that they'll be able to work together with the Kenya Kwanza government to implement what he promised the citizens of this country. And so he felt that having 50 is a good number. I know it will cost approximately 46 million per year to actually pay the salaries and maintain these extra 50 CASs. But one thing that I know, it might not be 50, but maybe we might be able to reach at a consensus at some point. But I want to believe that one of the angles that the judges looked into is this extra 27 that was added without public participation is what really led into them ruling that it was really unconstitutional.
But still, Mheshimiwa, just to interject, the High Court had declared itself, even before the president had increased that number to 50 from 23, had talked about the CAS positions being unconstitutional because they are not anchored anywhere in the law.
That's very true, and that's what our brother here, lawyer, mentioned earlier, that the parliament had not really, and the reason, one of the reasons that we really did not do the vetting is because there was no constitution that would allow us to proceed on with it. And as he mentioned, that somebody will have to come up with a petition to anchor it in the law, so that when we are bringing that now in, but in the process of us waiting, the president could not wait because things has to move on. The country has to move on. We have to deliver on what we promised to the people. The Kenya Kwanza government has a lot of promises that we made, and those promises has to be made. And as such, the president moved on, hoping and believing that some way, somehow we will have to, and I believe we eventually will have to have it in the Constitution, and we will have it in the Constitution over time. But it is not the only thing in this country that we have done. I know, like I mentioned earlier, the president respects the rule of law, and he makes sure that if the pronunciation from the three judges has to be taken very seriously. He's not going to proceed and say, okay, whatever the court has said, I'm going to look down on it, I'm going to proceed on, I'm going to make sure that these guys are in office and they'll proceed on receiving the salary. But I know, and I can assure you, some way, somehow, we'll find a way, we'll come up to an agreement between all parties, and this position of CAS at some point will be anchored in the Constitution.
All right. And when we come back, Wakili, because we need to go check out what's happening in Kisumu, you will tell us what are some of the remedies that the president can adopt, because at the end of the day, they might go to the Court of Appeal, just like the BBI, they might go to the Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal upholds the decision of the High Court, and then they go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court might uphold the decisions of the lower courts. So what are some of the remedies that the president can employ? Let's first of all cross over to Kisumu and have a feel of the decision by the High Court yesterday, which changes a lot of things in the country. Wycliffe, if you can hear me, good morning.
Well, thank you so much, Ben Troy, and a very good morning to you. We are coming to you live from the lakeside city of Kisumu, like you've mentioned it. And what a wonderful conversation you are having right there in the studio. And of course, it is here on NewsCheck that we have conversations that shape the policy making in the country. And let me just chip in with the conversations, or rather the views from Kisumu with regarding yesterday's court ruling on the issue of the CAS appointment. Beside that, we'll also be talking about the proposed review, or rather the increment of the salary of the civil servants. And with me here are two gentlemen, Chris Owala and Peter Oduk, basically to share with us what they think about the developing issues. Starting with you, Chris, if you can just move here, and maybe you want to introduce yourself and tell us what do you think about the yesterday's court ruling regarding the position of the Chief Administrative Secretary.
Thanks a lot, Cliff. My name is Chris Owala. I work with the Community Initiative Action Group Kenya. I think the ruling of yesterday is just affirmation on the previous ruling by Justice Mativo that the position of CAS is unconstitutional. And I think this was a ruling which was made in some years back. And I think also the court confirmed us that the president is not above the law. If you look at the BBI ruling and the ruling that was rendered yesterday, it's a confirmation that at least we can believe in rule of law, and Kenyans can trust the courts, and the courts can protect us in some way. Because this position of CAS, if you the frame of the constitution, if you look at the Guy report on the constitution in 2010, they said very well the Kenyans don't need a bloated cabinet. Kenyans need a lean cabinet. And that's why the frame of the constitution came out with 22 positions for cabinet portfolios. So by creating another layer is by itself in conflict with the law. And this was again going to give Kenya an unnecessary burden. So I think the court has spoken. Kenya need to move on. And I think the appeal of this case might not augur well for the government, because they're going to use public resources in this case. And again, this is a misuse of the resources. Although they have the constitutional right to appeal, but the appeal is ill-advised because they are going to spend public resources. And the Public Finance Management Act is clear. The prudent use of resources is a critical component that the state officers must protect. And they must also be seen to be protecting citizens' resources and use it as the law requires.
And if you look at initially the president actually defended the appointment of the 50 Chief Administrative Secretary, saying that he has an elaborate agenda for the country, and to achieve that agenda actually he needs more hands on deck. Don't you think these people have, the Chief Administrative, the appointees actually have that right to move to the Court of Appeal and also reclaim, and in order to reclaim their positions back?
You know, the agenda that the president wants to do, you cannot be done by political rejects. If you look at most of these people who are called the 50 CS, some of them are people who are politicians. So he was just redeeming them in a way, but they are not in any way going to help improve services for the citizen. It's a way of reward. But again, the appeal is allowed in law, because we are a country that governed by rule of law. Even the president is in the office because of the rule of law. They went to Supreme Court confirmed them that they'll be president. So it will only be good enough to allow them to appeal, but not to use public resources. We are not against the appeal. We are saying if the appeal is to be done, can they use their resources? But again, this is a confirmation that the office of AG is not useful for the president, because the current AG was a speaker, has been an MP, and is an AG, the person who has been a magistrate. So he could have seen this. So I tend to think that Kenyans are our burden also with a lot of unnecessary taxes, and this creation of 50 more is an indication that the president was saying, tell Kenyans it's above the law, utadu. But the court has spoken, told them, okay, hold on. This is what the law says. You can't. Article 10 of the Kenyan Constitution is clear. All this the Public Finance Management Act is clear, because you cannot create a position without a budget. So these also were not done. But I think now, as Kenyans, we need to say, Luta continue. Let's move forward. But if they want to petition, the Kenyan also will continue them. Kenyan will support the petitioners that went to court. They will go up to the Supreme Court to make sure they don't get to the office. Yes.
As things stand right now, we know those appointees will be moving to the Supreme Court to appeal that decision yesterday. But what could be the best way to out of this issue? What could be the best way out of this impasse?
First, the best way is that there are rumors that these people have been earning salary. I think the first there should be surcharge if that's the case. But two, these people need to let it go. Let it go, because that's not the end of the world. Let government be run, because currently we have a PS, and we have a cabinet, and we have undersecretary, we have many technical staffs, we have directors who can run any government, who can help Kenyan get services. And again, if anything, we have a devolution. If the government is feeling that they cannot do most of this function, let them devolve them fully to the county, so that the counties can help them manage some of these resources, if that's the issue. So that the county government came because they are closer to the people. So if the government is feeling that they are more stressed there with a lot of work, let the county get their fair share, because if you look at even the health sector, it's not fully devolved.
But this one here is a decision by the national government. Actually, it has the mandate to deliver to the citizens, putting aside the county government.
You know, we have 48 government which are distinct and are independent. So you can still delegate your function to the county government and give them resources. The law is clear. So you don't need to suffocate yourself that you're a national government, that you cannot collaborate. For example, the president said the other day, the community health workers, they help support, which means the health is devolved. But why are they supporting? Because they see that the mechanism at the national level cannot help them deliver. So they work with the counties to deliver. So nothing stops you from delegating or fully devolving functions that are supposed to devolve, like healthcare. We have a lot of resources in Nairobi. Make it go to the counties, let county deliver. Yes.
Thank you so much, Chris. Peter, if you can just basically also move here and share with us what you think about, actually there has been a proposal by the SRC to review, there was a proposal by the SRC to review the salaries of the senior state officers by 14% actually upwards. But then the president said, oh fine, we need to increase the salaries for across the board for the civil service. But then now we do it's done between 7 and 10%. What do you think about that decision, rather?
Thank you. My name is Peter Duke. I'm the chair of Kisumu County Development Trust. I believe it's not the right time for anyone to consider raising salaries for state officers, because you see our economy is crumbling. We cannot give, the government cannot offer adequate services because of the bloated wage bill. So increasing salaries of state officers at this moment is going to be a lot of burden on the taxpayer, because we'll have to take care of that bill that is added to what they're already earning. So I think, one, it's not the right time to do it because the economy is badly hit. We are not completely recovered from COVID. We are not recovered from the international recession. And you see the cost of living is so high. So increasing any salary at this moment is going to even put more burden on the public. The cost of living will go high. The taxes will be higher because we need to pay those salaries. So I think it is ill-advised for the president or for anyone or the SRC to consider raising any salaries at this moment.
But you said this increment is going to actually to benefit civil servants across the board. And these people, they actually also, they face the same economic downtime that is facing everyone all world over, not just in the country. Do you feel they also need the increment?
I don't. You would argue that everyone needs an increment of salary, but it depends on the economy. If the economy cannot sustain it, then it would be it would not be a good idea to increase it, because it's going to strain, and mostly it will strain businesses, it will strain local people, the hustlers as we call them. So even though it's going to be a personal benefit to them, but it's going to strain the public and the citizens in terms of how to take care of the wage bill. So it's not a good idea at the moment.
The SRC, the reason they're giving it is because this review ought to have happened actually a couple of years back, but then it was put on hold because of the COVID, the pandemic. But now they're saying now the economy is easing up. Is that a valid reason?
It's not a valid reason, because as you see the situation, you see prices of fuel are increasing. You see cost of living generally is increasing. So it will not be right. According to me, I don't think the economy has eased any better. And therefore, adding a lot of salaries in terms of, I would rather we start considering how we can talk about development expenditure rather than the cost of administration and salaries. So the economy, for me, I'm not an economist, but I believe what I'm seeing as a common man, as a leader in this county, is that the economy is pressing on the common man, and adding a lot of burden on the common man would not be a good thing that any government can consider at this moment.
And you see, there are proposals to review the NHIF contribution, the NSSF and all that, and talk about also the housing levy that was passed in the Finance Act now. Don't you think this one also gives the civil servants a leeway actually to contribute these proposed contributions?
Yeah, talking about NHIF, I think if we can get good services out of the new regulations, that when you go to an hospital, you will find good services, everything will be taken care of as provided for in the NHIF Act, that would be a good thing. But you realize that even with the collections, the recent cases are that people are being turned back when they have this, they need to seek these services. So I think if we can find a way of getting more resources for NHIF and for insurance, it would be a better idea. Personally, I believe that if we could have everyone pay equitably like they have suggested, for me, I think equitable contribution towards NHIF would be much better. But the only portion I don't agree with is increasing contributions for voluntary or unemployed. I think they should leave it at the original cost, but equitable contributions in terms of the salaried people, I think that would be good enough so that we can get better services through NHI. But it also depends on the management of the funds. If it will be managed well, that will be good enough. But as we speak, that fund is not being properly managed.
But then now the proposed increment of salary will help civil servants also to contribute to this kitty?
That's a catch-22, as you see. The basic is that if you increase the salaries, you are putting a lot of burden on the taxpayer. I think for me that is the basis direction I want the country to take. That you do not increase salaries for a few people and put the burden for taking care of that salary on a few other individuals who are not even employed. You look at the rate of unemployment in Kenya, and the business people are getting very little because of the economy. So I think in terms of increasing salaries, my position, and this is what I have heard from many residents in this county, is that we need not go there. It's not the right time. Let's wait for the economy to properly improve, and let's create employment opportunities so that we can have more people in the tax bracket. When we add more people in the tax bracket, then the government can collect a lot of resources to undertake the development activities that they want to undertake.
Thank you so much. Troy, that is Chris and Peter sharing with us their views regarding some contentious issues in the country. Actually, talk about the CAS ruling, the court ruling yesterday, and also the proposed increment of salary between 7 and 10% for civil servants. You've heard them mention that for the salary increment, they believe it is not the right time actually for that to happen. They opine that actually the SRC should put this on hold until the economy improves. That is in their view. And also for the CS ruling, you've heard them mention that it is quite monumental and quite indicative that the judiciary is independent and can also pronounce itself on matters that are of benefit actually to the ordinary Kenyans. Well, this is a conversation that doesn't end here, Ben, Troy, but then I will hand it back to you in studio so that you can carry it on in studio. Back to you, Troy.
Thank you, Wycliffe Fokech from the lakeside city of Kisumu. There engaging two Kenyans in regards to what the CAS's ruling was by the three-judge bench yesterday, who declared the positions as unconstitutional. And let me go back to my panelists. I have Abraham Kirwa, who is the MP for Mosop constituency, and just next to him we have an advocate of the High Court and also a governance and leadership expert, Gibson Gisore. Well, back to you, Wakili. Before we went to Kisumu, we were talking about some of the remedies that the president have. And I'll start with Article 152 of the Constitution, which prescribes the number of CSs that the president can ascribe to. We have a minimum of 14, but a maximum of 22. It doesn't talk about any other position like CAS. So this is going to be a tough and a hard mountain to climb if at all the Court of Appeal, the Appellate Court and the Supreme Court decide to uphold the decision of the High Court.
Thank you, Bentra. Again, I will wish to clarify on something which you asked me earlier, and I gave an answer. The one where you say that the judiciary participated in the swearing in of the judges.
I've since confirmed they did it.
They didn't.
Yes.
They actually never sent even any of the officials to witness the process.
So how
they fully stayed off the way Parliament said we don't have any provision of law which allows us to do that. So the two arms of government have been very clear that we don't have any particular legal support on that particular issue. So it's only the president who went ahead and actually initiated the process, appointed them, and actually swore them. So the backdrop of the decision which was given last year, we was very clear that those positions are not founded in any law. So the only other thing which ensured that the Uhuru CAS sit through the parliament through the entire period of his term was that they went and sought a stay order in the upper court, which was never executed to the very end, which the court also in this time says even the 23 which the public participation actually happened cannot benefit from a stay of a different set of regime. So that takes the president to point zero. Yes. That even the 23 which the public participation did happen still are not constitutional. That's why the entire 15 hour have since been told that they are unconstitutional appointments. So the remedies for the president is just to follow the law, because even if you go to the higher court with such founding, you are not going to, the court is not going to insert that section of CSS into the constitution. It's not going to imagine or plug some provision from there and be able to insert. I think the only thing is to have, there's still several positions which these people can be appointed to. The president should be benevolent enough and be magnanimous enough to actually say that, you know, guys, we thought this could work, but it's not working. Let's try to follow the law. Let's not follow in the tracks of the former regime, which he has been very critical about, that they didn't do all things right or a couple of things right. I think the best thing for him is actually to take the bullet and say, guys, we need to follow the constitution. The court has said it, it said last year, it has said this year again. We don't have a way out. Even if the appeal is just buying time, because remember, these people did not even get into the government payroll. There was a stay order that they could not be able to even get into office and draw salary. So I don't know how he's going to circumvent all that legal pandemonium by going for an appeal, because now there are a lot of things, there are several scores which he has to jump to get to them to office, which is going to also demonstrate that he really does not believe in the rule of law if he pushes this forward. My opinion from my own perspective is that is to address the nation and say, guys, look here, we made a political decision which since the court has decided that it's not the right move. As a president and as a person who respects the rule of law, I will wish to stop here and then we will be able to push forward. There is a political, as Mheshimiwa, there is a political need to satisfy every sections of the country and appoint these people so that the face of Kenya is reflected. Remember when he chose the CSS, there was an outcry that, you know, some section of the country had not been given, but there are only 22. When it came to the PSS, like my own county, did not get any, and there was a big outcry. So when we had at least a former Mheshimiwa get something, people were like, we are now at home, he has recognized us. There is that challenge. But then I believe following the constitution means much more to Kenyans than political rewarding or political tokenism. Kenyans will still understand. They will not punish him that, you know, it's because you've not given us something, but the court has said. Then the president has got to rule by the law. So those are some of the issues which I think he should be able to sit down with these political advisors and the legal advisors. I think the AG and the Solicitor General are the people I believe in. The Solicitor General, if I may say, was my pupil master. He taught me, so I believe they will be able to advise the president in a very proper manner that now let's try to find another angle, because they are ambassadors, they are chairmen of various parastatals where these people can actually fit.
All right, and it's a good thing that you've mentioned that, because we will be looking at some of the advices of course, the AG is the Chief Legal Government Advisor, and these are some of the loopholes that he was supposed to see. You do remember the former AG had a backlash because of the BBI. Kenyans wondering why didn't the AG advise the then president that he's trending on landmines and never told him that we need to take this route. Maybe the same situation that we are having. Gentlemen, we're going to be discussing that when we come back. And another thing is how the president has to balance between the politics and governance, because in the good thing that you say that we have also to look at the political correctness, or more or less the regional balance in some of these positions. Is there a way that the president can go back to Wanjiku? Because Article 1 talks about Wanjiku. Can he go back and Wanjiku can give him the green light to extend his executive? We'll be discussing that when we come back. Let's take a quick breather, and of course, if you have any suggestion, comment, or even where you're watching us from, we highly recommend that you send us a text, a chat, so that we may be able to sample some of your views and pick your mind as well. Let's be back.
Tunatambulika kwa mandhari yetu ya kuvutia,
tamaduni zetu, ukarimu wetu, vyakula vyetu, uchapakazi,
na pia kwa sauti tofauti za watangazaji wetu waliobobea.
Dibengo niko hapa aka upcoming sponsor. Bila shaka hapa ni kama PDG, ma deep state, pia vile cartels.
Tunaenzi talanta za pwani, tunakuza talanta za hapa kwetu nyumbani.
Tell a friend to tell a friend. Tuko mjengoni kama kawa na wanangu wengine wawili.
Usikose kutegea 103.1 Pwani FM, station ambayo itakupa fursa ya kupata uhondo kamili wa pwani na kuleta Wakenya pamoja.
Pwani FM, tafrija ya kipwani.
I never wanna see you again. Hello from the other side.
Kiswahili kitukuzwe.
Ubunifu wa kukariri na kughani mashairi.
Enyi wema wanafunzi, nawapa jema shauri. Kukimbilia mapenzi shuleni ni hatari.
Mgonjwa hupata tiba, mdaku hupata nini?
Hawa wanafunzi ni madijitali.
Tamakenzi anatuhumia wafuasi wake kufunga kwa muda mrefu kiasi cha wao kukonda na kungonda kimbaumbao mwiko wa pilao.
Ni mnoma, siku moja nitakuhelp. Hata mimi.
Tunapata maudhui ya utu kwa kuwa Umu anamsaidia hazina.
Ni vyema pia tunapochambua vile vitabu ukapata mifano zaidi ya moja.
Matarajio yetu ya kufaidika kutokana na hazina hii yanaenda tenge na kusababisha hali ya uchumi kupanda.
Kiswahili kitukuzwe.
Welcome back to KBC News Check. We are looking at the state of the nation and more specifically with what transpired yesterday at the High Court in regards to the CAS appointments by the President, which happened in March of this year. And I have Honorable Abraham Kirwa, who is the MP for Mosop, and next to him we have Gibson Gisore, who is a constitutional lawyer and also a governance and leadership expert. Thank you so much for keeping tuned to KBC. Before we went for the break, Mheshimiwa, we were talking about the delicate balancing act that the President now has to do. Remember the 50 CASs that he had appointed. In as much as we are talking about service delivery, is also representation of the face of Kenya as well.
Yes.
So what do you think the next card for the President will be?
Ben, like my friend here, Wakili, mentioned earlier, the President is in a very delicate situation. Because, like I told you, Kenya is one of the countries who actually respects the rule of law. It's a democratic country. So we actually obey what the court has ruled. So the President, like I mentioned to you also, is very careful in making sure that the decisions that he's going to make now moving forward pertaining to this particular ruling by the three-bench judge, he has to be very careful because he has to show the people of Kenya, one, the decision he made was right in appointing the 50, but at the same time, he has to also know and he has also to make sure that he is also upholding the rule of law. So the ruling, not the ruling, there will be an appeal for sure, and there will be an hearing again. But I think one of the main things that we will be looking into is the constitutional amendment. Because if we are a country of law, then this particular position has to be in the constitution, like what we have on Article 152 that actually you quoted a few minutes ago that says you have to have a minimum of 14 CSS and no more than 22, and that is actually in the law. The law does not provide deputies of this particular CSS. And maybe the framers of the constitutions or fathers of the law who came up with this, they did not see the need at that time when they were writing this law. And that is why the law keeps continuing to evolve. There will be some changes as we move forward. It's not like it's written in stone. It can be amended. That's why we call it constitutional amendment. So now that we have seen that for us to have the face of Kenya in this cabinet, we also need to have some of these CSS that we are requesting to have them in the constitution. We need to have it engraved in the constitution so that we don't have somebody going to court saying no, it's unconstitutional. So the President felt it was right, of course, to bring at least the face of Kenya so that every part is represented. But for that to be held up in any court of law, it has to be within the constitution. And so the only other option now at this point is now to do the constitutional amendment. As long as, and I know it might take some time, but that will be the route that I would advise the President and his team as well to sit down and truly advise the President well. And I know he's somebody who listens, he's somebody who will read, and he will understand. But in the meantime, as we do the appeal, and I know it will take also some time before we come back to the hearing, we have to find a way now to make sure that this government is big enough, like you mentioned. There is so many places that this particular individual can serve. in his government. And I know that he's not going to just, take them to the street. We mentioned the issue of the wage bill that has actually gone up. And that is also something the president is very keen on making sure that as much as we are controlling the wage bill and as much as we have these 50 people, where do we put them? Because I know for sure that I don't think that they will continue to draw the salary until a case is concluded. But he will come up with a solution that is going to be acceptable to all parties, to make sure that these particular individuals who actually helped him and were part of his administration campaign will also still be rewarded and also still be able to serve this country. But two, we also have to make sure it is within the law. And as such, the only option I see at this point is the constitutional amendment that is going to make sure that the president comes out clean, that also he respects the rule of law, which I think he will. At the same time, this particular 50 CSS will also be part of this administration. They will find somewhere to actually have them serve, and all of us will continue. But one way or another one, I want to tell you, Kenya is way ahead in most of the African countries in being a democratic nation. We respect the rule of law. We don't have the dictators running the country, especially the president that we have now and his administration. They actually respect the law, and I know they'll do the right thing. But
Mheshimiwa, just to mention, Kenyans are still disturbed the fact that the court issued some orders and they were not followed in regards to the fuel prices, because we are now, it's more or less like we are using the new Finance Act, which was halted by the High Court. And until the case is hard and determined, then everything stays as it is, but we are not seeing that. Another thing is that the CAS's positions was declared unconstitutional by the High Court last year, and still we have had a government which has not only had the 23 that were unconstitutional in the first place, now we have 50 CASs. Those are two things that shows that in as much as we are a democratic country, we enjoy quite some developed jurisprudence in our courts as well, we still not following the rule of law, Mheshimiwa. If we have to follow, the law has no sideways. If we have to follow the law, we have to follow the law.
Ben, yes. As we mentioned earlier, of course, there is the politics part of it and there's the governing part of it. Right now, we are truly governing. The president is in office and is trying to make sure that he governs this country, he delivers the promises that he gave to the Kenyans. And one of the things that he thought and is going to be the right thing to do is to make sure that almost every community, every region of this country is equally represented, so that they will feel that they are part and parcel of this administration. And as such, these positions of CASs was one of the positions that we thought it would really make a difference in bringing at least everybody from almost every region, so that they feel, because there are some counties that they really don't have somebody in the cabinet, because we are talking of 14 to 22 cabinet secretaries. So, and we have 47 counties. So, of course, that is almost less than half of all these counties. What are you going to do with the rest of the counties that did not get? The PSS are not enough. So, these positions of the 50, actually, the president was very wise in saying that we should actually, and we was hoping that somehow we'll still find a way, and we will find a way, I can guarantee you, to bring these positions back. But now that the court has pronounced itself twice on this matter, then it's wise for us to go back and sit down and say, okay, how do we do the constitutional amendment to make sure that these positions are now absorbed and it's now legal in the constitution, so that we don't have this matter. On the issue of EPRA, on the issue of the fuel, and like you mentioned, I want to assure you one thing as we move forward. This country, I told you, I sit in a committee of debt and privatization in Parliament. And I want to tell you that we are in a huge debt. The previous governments took a huge loan in trying to run the government. And almost in every 100 shillings that we have, 70 to 75 shillings goes towards servicing our debt. And so we are left with only less than 25 shillings to make sure that we have development, we have wages, we have all these things to take care of. And as such, this EPRA, this increase on fuel is also going to help this country, because we have to continue running the government. We have to continue servicing the debts. We have to continue making sure that the government is running. And so on this finance bill, one of the proposals was on this issue of increase of the tax to 16%, from 8% to 16%. I know that there is a court case that is going on, and I think the hearing is going to be on the 5th. which I believe is tomorrow.
Yes.
This hearing is going to take place tomorrow, and based on whatever ruling it will come, probably maybe a stay, so that as we continue to figure out way forward, we can continue to implement. Because Ben, the country is going through a lot of struggle at the moment, and we are trying to find a way to get funding to make sure the country runs. You want to tell me, by halting this finance act now, as we said, so that now at some point the government is going to come to a standstill if this particular finance act is not implemented. So this part of this EPRA, the 8%, is what was factored in this finance bill to allow the country to continue running. And like I mentioned, the president is one of these people who actually obeys the rule of law. And I know that when that case was filed, the hearing is going to take place tomorrow. The ruling is going to come out. We don't know, because we cannot predetermine whatever the ruling the judge is going to give tomorrow. But one thing I know, that the government is one. Although we have judiciary being independent, we have the parliament being independent, and also we have the executive being independent, but we also respect the rulings of every part of. But at the same time, I want to believe that the judiciary, some way, somehow, I tend to think that maybe they may have overstepped a little bit on their ruling, but at the same time, we also have to respect it. So let's allow the president and his cabinet and his administration to continue to run this country. Give them the opportunity. It's not even a year, and he's really doing his best to make sure that this country continues to stay afloat.
All right. Wakili, I'll still speak it from where Mheshimiwa has talked about. He still insisted that the president is keen on ensuring that we are a country that follows the law. But from the 2-3 incidents that we have seen, that's a number of Kenyans could argue, because the CAS's positions were declared unconstitutional last year. It was declared yesterday, and again they have vowed to appeal that. And EPRA, following squarely and as a government agency, should also follow the law, because at the end of the day, you don't expect EPRA not to follow the law, and you expect me as the taxpayer to also follow the same law. Another thing, the AG, I'm quite sure the CAS's positions did go through his office, because being the chief legal government advisor, he should have noted that, and also being a person that has ever been a magistrate, we're talking about Justin Muturi, he has also been the Speaker of the National Assembly, now he is the Attorney General. He knows what exactly transpired yesterday, last year and yesterday, when the courts pronounced themselves on these positions. I would like you to comment on that.
Thank you, Ben. Some of these things are not like you're operating on a clear linear line. So some of the political and running government, I think other than the legal advice, I would want to believe there are other people who give extra legal advice, which sometimes looks more appealing than the legal advice, which is very strict. So I think the president sometimes falls into the other side of the extra legal advice, which ends up having him in a tight corner like we are in. But then, as Mheshimiwa said, is that there's a cry, there's a huge cry, underlining cry that, this government tends to do appointments which are one-sided. So I think through such appointments, he wanted to redeem himself and look like he's a statesman who looks at every corner of this republic, which I wouldn't be able to tell for now whether it was a political wise move or an issue of following extra legal advice, which he tended to fall for. But what is clear is that a president is a doctor, and I mean, you can't study to that level and be able to not be able to understand very simple concepts of what is expected of you as the president. The law is very clear, and it has always been very clear. There are two rulings, the two judgments which have been given, that these positions are non-existent in law. So trying to push it to Kenyans or shove to Kenyans' faces that, I will still go ahead and do this, and then even if the court rules that I will still go and appeal, is just trying to tell people that you don't want to give up. You don't want to actually accept that you did something wrong. What I will advise is that the president needs to actually be very gallant and say that, this is what the court has said. It said it last year. We are here again. Let's just leave this at where we have reached, and then be able to maneuver something else which can be able to be within the law. There are various options which I can be able to create, and the government is big. It's like an elephant. It eats everything. So government can be able to come up with better strategies. I'm glad Mheshimiwa is talking about that. Is in the government debt and privatization committee, if I'm not wrong. He has spoken more on the debt part, but not the privatization bit, which would actually change this country a great deal. If the president could actively engage some of these people and give them, if he really believes that they were to deliver, he can actually engage them in terms of effecting the privatization. Because if we do privatize a couple of non-performing government institutions, we will be able to create a lot more money. We will be able to make them more efficient so that they can be able to bring more money into the coffers of government. And then we will not need to tax Kenyans. You have talked about the EPRA issue. We wouldn't need to tax Kenyans through the nose to be able to pay debts, to be able to run government. Because imagine a scenario whereby we have close to 100 parastatals, but most of them are non-performing. If we privatize the key ones, especially the ones in the agricultural sector, they will be putting money in Kenyans' pockets. And once this money is in Kenyan pockets, they will increase their profitability and efficiency, and then they will be giving taxes. These taxes are not equivalent to the one we are giving between me and you. We are giving, or Mheshimiwa is giving to the government. These are huge monies. So if Mheshimiwa could sit down and be able to push this particular agenda, and especially the issue of agriculture, especially the agricultural parastatals, which are quite a number. If they can be, because these are the people, agriculture is the backbone of the Kenyan economy. If we can be able to encourage this, and then we move into aspects of manufacturing, and then now we'll be talking exports, because we have a huge market. Now we have the East African community has extended to Congo, which has an 80 million market. So those are lying opportunities which we are supposed to just, low-lying fruits which we just supposed to pick on them and then capitalize on them and change this economy, instead of telling people that the only option is tax you to the very end and pay debt and all that. So some of these ideas are things which I think the president should make, even committees, because that is within the law, to make committees to see this process through. And we will change this country once and for all, instead of delving into the unconstitutional terrain, which of course keeps bringing shame.
All right, and Mheshimiwa and the Kenya Kwanza government, we are 100% sure they're going to appeal that, and they are quite adamant that they will find a way, and mostly the way that they can find to get these CIS's positions back is going back to Wanjiku, the constitutional amendments. Kindly take us through what would the Kenya Kwanza government have to do to ensure that this is enshrined in law.
I'm glad that Mheshimiwa acknowledges that indeed where they are at a tight corner, and the government is in a tight corner to actually pull through with this process. The only other option is through a constitutional amendment. We had the BBI, which of course was a wise move, but then they filled in a lot of other unnecessary things which were also treading on aspects of unconstitutional provisions which they wanted to pass through that process. If Mheshimiwa could be able to pick up whatever it is that the BBI was anticipating, and then restrict themselves on the issues of law, which are very clear, which are dear to Kenyans, not put in some other provisions which are going to make Kenyans feel that they want to be opportunists, then the Mwananchi will of course be able to agree. It is not lost on Kenyans that we need the face of Kenya in terms of the executive, in terms of government appointments. So if that comes to the floor, and Kenyans will want to look at that in a different way.
All right.
For example,
kindly hold the thought.
Yes.
I'm informed that Matatu Owners Association, they are currently having a presser at the Tumaini House, where they are discussing, among other issues, road safety and also the rise in price of fuel. Let's first of all listen to what they have to say, and then we're back to this live discussion.
A reliable and efficient transport system and addressing the economic realities faced by the Matatu owners. We recognize that our passengers are already grumbling with a financial burden, and we assure commuters that we are undertaking this fare adjustment as a last resort. We remain committed to providing safe, reliable, and affordable transport service to the Kenyans public, and we will continue to explore all possible avenues to mitigate the on commuters. We are also engaging the relevant stakeholders, including government agents and the fuel suppliers, to address issues that have led to the situation. We firmly believe that we can find sustainable solution through constructive dialogue and collaboration among all parties involved. Meanwhile, we urge the government to subsidize fuel price for PSV operators and alleviate the burden on both Matatus and passengers. We also make a plea to the public to be patient with us while we look for practical alternatives to spare them from having dig deeper to their pockets. We understand that this may raise concern and question among the public. We, however, reaffirm our commitment to serving the Kenyan public, and we thank you for the understanding and continuity supporting during these challenging times. Thank you. So, any question?
What is your take on some service providers that have already hiked the fares even without notice? Like you just get into a Matatu, maybe you're paying 100 bob, then you're told this.
Live from Tumaini House, that has been the newly installed chairman of the Matatu Owners Association, Albert Karakacha there. They are addressing the country in regards to the fuel prices, and I've been able to pick up a few things. Is that brace for it, because they have suggested that the fares that you pay could have an increase of about 30% of the current rate. So you do the math, you say that maybe a place that you used to pay 100 shillings could go up to 130, 150 shillings. All right. And another thing they have told the government is to kindly subsidize the price of fuel, so that they may be able to maintain the current fares that we have. So if it's a 1,000 shillings journey, do the math, it's about 1,300 now, and especially for long distance travelers. And also they have urged the public to be a little bit more patient with them, because any moment that there are price hikes, of course the Matatu owners and the Matatu industry gets the wrath of Kenyans as well. And that is a discussion that we're talking about here in regards to the Finance Act and also the CAS decision that was thrown out by the three-judge bench of the High Court. Gibson, there's something that you are talking about in regards to what the Kenya Kwanza government needs to do, if at all. The Appellate Court and the Apex Court, that the Supreme Court decides to uphold the decision of the High Court and throws out the CAS's cases altogether. The steps that they can take to go to Wanjiko and to have them back and enshrined and cast in stone in the Constitution.
Ben, I don't have a doubt in my mind, given the trajectory which this case has taken from the time it was first filed, that indeed we are actually going to see the same replay itself over and over, even if they want to go up to the Supreme Court. So that is their right to appeal. We will wait and see what the courts say, but in my mind I don't see anything much changing. The steps which they need to take to go back to Wanjiko is to initiate a process of amending the Constitution, which can either start through a public popular initiative, which has since been tried. We have had several attempts at that, or go through a parliamentary process where petition is, even Njue can draft a petition and then be able to move it through parliament. Then eventually it will end up at Mwananchi through a referendum, which the referendum will be the key decider. We have had quite a couple of referendums. We had, I think, one in 2005, which we saw the government lost in terms of bringing in the new constitution, and then later in 2010, which passed, which gave birth to the current constitution, which we are again debating whether we need to actually amend it to suit some of the interests. There is a very active debate whether is it time to amend or we give it some more time. But then, you know, society evolves and changes fast. We have tried this constitution on a couple of issues. So there are some very sticky issues which we feel that up to now we've not been able to achieve. And there are some other things which were set there in the constitution which had not been tested. So we need to actually now be able to sit down as Kenyans and decide how do we want to proceed? Do we need to amend some sections of the constitution? But then, you know, the challenge I saw with the BBI was the process that the political class wants to take advantage of that particular opportunity of the feeling of Kenyans that we need to change the constitution or amend it. Then they also want to insert some provisions there which are very problematic in terms of how this process is supposed to be able to be midwifed. And that is the biggest challenge the BBI faced, because Kenyans had the backlash now that don't take advantage of us. We might be desperate, but don't take advantage of us. So that is what I felt. So what basically the current government regime is, they can move a parliamentary process or can be able to, and you remember, the popular initiative has also been tested out that the government, that's what the BBI was saying, the government cannot be. The president is not part of Wanjiku to start a popular initiative. Yes. That was the biggest predicament the BPS have at, whereby one of the questions was whether the president is part of, you can be classified as a common man who can be able to start an initiative. So that was decided that it's not the case. So they can only be able to use parliament, which is a very active route, since they have the numbers.
That's the easiest way.
That's the easiest way. That is the easiest way, and since they have the numbers, so they can use their numbers and be able to push that particular agenda, and then it will get to Mwananchi so easily, and we hope they succeed.
And so, for avoidance of doubt, you say that this is more or less not touching on what we were hearing at the High Court and the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court, the basic structure doctrine, such that for them to be added into the Constitution, we do not need to go to Wanjiku for a referendum. Is that what you're saying?
I think for this, it will need to go to the referendum. I don't see any other way of using parliament, because if the issue of the option of parliament was an active one, nothing could have stopped them to explore that out, because it could have been an easy kill. But this goes to the aspect of governance, because it's changing the structure of our governance. It's touching on how many, because the executive is the key policy decision maker for the country. So there's no way you're going to add the provision of CSS into the draw and then say that it's not affecting the basic structure. It will of course affect it. Okay. It will of course affect it in terms of finances. It will affect it in terms of governance, because you will have to spell out their responsibilities and what it is that they can be able to do and not be able to do. You know, that is adding another layer. So that will of course essentially mean that the people will have to be involved. Otherwise it will also be kicked out.
All right, let's first of all now look at shift focus to matters, the conversation on decarbonizing Africa by utilizing green energy. Earlier on, Mohamed Ali, who is the special climate change envoy to the president of Kenya, had been talking about that Climate Justice Summit earlier on, hosted at the Kenyatta University. Let's first of all listen in.
While we thought that we are going to bring down the energy consumption, the figures that we are being given by the International Energy Authority is, instead of reducing the fossil fuel consumption, we actually went up by 2.9 million barrels per day, higher than what we consumed the previous year. And the total consumption of fossil fuel last year went to 97.3 million barrels per day, And so the average contribution of the energy in the climate, in the greenhouse gases has continued to go upwards. We are now at 82%. So what Africa can contribute is, yes, that's the trajectory and the direction that the world is taking. And indeed, even the investments around the world for fossil fuel is still going up. But in Africa, what we are saying is we have a huge opportunity of renewable energy. You probably have been told that this country where you are, our country here, Kenya, is a good example of some of the best renewable energy countries. 92% of our grid is green. So most of our grid, in fact, all the types of the green grids is found here in Kenya. We have hydro, that contributes significant part to our grid. We have geothermal, which is from underground sources. We have solar, and we have wind. So all the four are found here, and we're putting up several batteries also for storage. So Africa overall has significant potential for contributing to the world decarbonization by tapping into the renewable energy potential that our continent has. The figures that we have is 60% of the renewable energy potential of the world is found here. As you probably are aware, most of the continent is a few kilometers away from the equator. So everywhere in Africa, from the north to the south, we are not that far away from the sun, the tropics, and therefore we have significant sunshine in most times of the day, and so we have very good solar. In addition, the Rift Valley countries, from Djibouti all the way to Mozambique, we have huge potential of tapping into our underground sources of geothermal. Massive energy potential. In Kenya alone, we have in excess of 10 gigawatts. Our total production currently is about 3 gigawatts. And our geothermal potential is 10 gigawatts. If we tapped that, we could be able to supply not just to Kenya, but to other parts of the continent. Our big rivers, as you probably are aware, all of you coming from Africa, from the Niger to Congo to the Nile, the potential to tap into the hydropower potential of those rivers is immense. The Inga Dam in the Congo River, which has not been tapped and has been discussed severally, waiting for financing, can provide power to all of southern Africa. But we have not tapped into that. Similar to also in the Niger and other rivers and so forth. The wind potential, massive. In Kenya, so far we have the biggest wind capacity in the continent. Many other African countries are putting up similar wind powers. I know in Egypt, for those who are coming from Egypt, there is a 10 gigawatt wind farm that is being put up that's going to be much bigger than the one that we have here in Kenya. But we have very significant wind speeds also. So Africa can contribute significantly to changing the direction or the trajectory the world currently is going towards higher emissions using fossil fuel, tapping into the green resources and the renewable resources of the continent. When you come to, of course, manpower and human population, I'm so happy to be told here that you are all 18 to 35 years of age. The average age of our continent is 19. 75% of us, 1.2 billion Africans, are just about 19. And we are the youngest continent, the future of the world. And the people who are going to make a difference in the world, for a world that is currently aging, it's you, the young people of the world, is this continent. And so getting the best training, getting the best skills to discuss and contribute to the transformation that the world changes, it is Africa that is able to produce that. Of course, that requires skilling, and I want to encourage you to get that.
Is the special climate change envoy to the President of the Republic of Kenya, Mohammed Ali, there at the Climate Justice Summit that he was hosted at the Kenyatta University earlier on, and they're talking about decarbonization, and especially right here in the country, and for saying whether we will be having green energy in the country by the year 2030, because talking about decarbonization, use of clean energy, solar and geothermal, and not only here in Kenya but in the region as well. That was earlier on at the Kenyatta University. Now allow me to go back to our topic of discussion today. We are looking at the state of the nation, and we have been looking more specifically on what the High Court yesterday ruled in regards to the CAS's position and what is the way forward, especially for the president and the Kenya Kwanza government that was hell-bent on ensuring that we have 50 CASs for a number of reasons, including service delivery, face of the country, and also looking at matters governance. I have Honorable Abraham Kirwa, who is the MP for Mosop, and is also a member of the Housing Committee in the National Assembly, and also the Public Debts and Privatization. We'll be having 2 or 3 questions in regards to your committee. Just next to him, we have a constitutional lawyer and also an leadership and governance expert, Gibson Gisore. Mheshimiwa, you also sit at the Housing Committee. The Finance Act that was challenged by Senator Okia Omtata, we are having a mention tomorrow to give us the directions in regard to that case. And housing has been one of the issues. And I don't want us to go deeper into it, but just an overview, because a lot of people are talking about, in as much as the CASs are not anchored in law, the housing could pose a number of challenges, because even if you want to know the progress of maybe how much you've contributed, if you have any queries, just like you can go to the NSSF building right here on the NHIF building to get the inquiry. There has not been quite a good framework in terms of the housing project in the country. What would you have to say on that?
Thank you, Ben, for this question. But allow me to just comment a little bit about this issue of climate change.
Yes, please.
And this climate justice that's going on. I want to show you that Kenya has a huge opportunity now to take lead on this issue of decarbonization. The fact that we produce quite a number of green energy in the country. We're talking of the solar, we're talking of the wind, we have also, geothermal. We have quite a bit of resources that we can use to make sure that on this issue of decarbonization, we take a lead. As much as we are really trying to encourage Africa to take part and take the lead, I think Kenya should just step forward and really promote this issue of green energy. When you look at developed countries, the pollution rate in those countries has skyrocketed because they don't have a lot of these natural resources that we are talking about. The wind, the issue of geothermal, the issue of the sun, because of where we are located. Kenya is strategically placed to be the leader in this particular issue of decarbonization. And I think as a nation, and I want to really applaud the president because he's onto it on this issue of the climate. The climate change is really eating our cake. It's just finishing all of us in this earth. And for us to actually reverse all the losses that we've had as a nation and as a country, and also as a world, we have to move forward. You talked about the issue of afforestation where we are planting a lot of trees. Now, this issue of actually going into green energy is something that as a nation we need to invest. We need to get into it and to make sure that what can we do? Because most of the countries now are just trying to buy carbon from Africa, because now that is where you can still buy this carbon. Let's say Russia, let's say the US, let's say these are the developed countries, because they know they don't have that opportunity now to reverse back. So they come and buy the carbon from us. So as a nation, and I really liked what Ali mentioned here, that Africa has the youngest population, an average age of 19. That means this is the future of the world. And as a future of the world, we have an opportunity to save our future. And the only way to save our future is to make sure that we are going back into green energy. And if we go back into green energy, we will have a long future. We have clean air. I've lived in many other countries. I've lived in the US. I've lived in other countries. One of the things that you find there is the quality of air that you breathe in Africa and in these other countries is totally different. So we have something special that we need to make sure that we save. We have something special that we need to be proud of, but at the same time, as a nation, we need to invest on this green energy to save our future and our future generations to come.
That was very well said, Mheshimiwa.
Thank you.
All right. To
on this issue of housing, I'm in the Committee of Housing in Parliament, and we discussed quite a bit on these matters of, we look at countries like Singapore, we look at countries like Thailand. We got independence at the same time. But 20 years after they got their independence, those countries are very independent of themselves. They don't borrow money from outside. They invested quite a bit in housing projects. If you go, almost 80% of the population has moved from living in the rural areas to urban areas where now there's housing. So the government made a deliberate effort to make sure that there was enough housing for its citizens by creating low-income housing like what the president is trying to do now. So His Excellency, what he's doing is that he's trying to make sure that we look at that model, what they did use, so that we get as many people to come into the urban, so that we have enough land for agriculture. Because Kenya depends on agriculture a lot. But the problem is we are subdividing the lands until it gets to a point that you don't have even enough land to do the agriculture. But if you do this low-income housing, what is going to happen, it will allow people now to move into centers, to move into towns and get affordable housing. It is not that you cannot afford to buy a house. You and me, we can go to Nairobi and buy a house for 5 million, 10 million or 20 million. But Mama, they don't have saved to use as a down payment. So this project of housing, what is intended to common person to afford, and that is why we suggested, and it is suggested that we now do a 1.5% deduction from your salary. And this 1.5% is now going to allow us to have a pool of resources to allow us now to generate and to build as many low-income housing as possible, so that it will allow Mama Mboka to come and purchase a home. You know, putting a down payment and then making a payment as low as 5,000 shillings a month. On this 5,000 shillings a month, it is not just rent, it is now actually owning a home. It will allow them to own a home. And so as such, they are coming up with a program called Boma Yangu. On this Boma Yangu, when you look into Boma Yangu and you register, you say, I'm interested in, let's say, I want to buy a house in Kapsabet, I want to buy a house in Eldoret, I want to buy a house in Mosop, Kabiet.
But Mheshimiwa, the issue has been, in as much as the housing project is a very noble cause and a very good idea for Kenyans, the timing, they're talking about the timing, is quite wrong. And something else that is quite catching the eye is that we didn't even give the employers time. Maybe we could have talked about from January of next year, we'll be having this and this and this. But the project has been lauded by even international investors as well.
Yeah, and I agree with you
but the timing
on this issue of timing. There is no perfect timing. Let me tell you, if you say, I
this is not the right time.
I am rich enough to buy a car, I will be rich enough. There will be no time that you say, I'm rich enough, or I have. So somebody has to take the bold step and say, it's time to do it. Even though the circumstances may not be perfect, but we need to start from somewhere. It might not be the perfect timing, it might not be the right time, in the right place, but once you start something, you know, Nike says, just do it. You know, that is the slogan of Nike. You don't wait and say, when the timing is right, I'll start running. I'll start going to the gym. You just do it and start just doing it. And as such, as a nation, there is, you know, remember this issue of housing? We had discussed this thing, I think, from the previous administration. I think Kibaki tried to do it. Uhuru Kenyatta tried to do it. And there was also, they were facing these kind of challenges. But somebody has to be bold enough to say, let's bite the bullet and let's get started. So that years from now, we'll be able to say, we did it. And we are just making
Unfortunately, Mheshimiwa, the Kenyan economy is not doing very well as the sports apparel Nike, so that we can just say, let's do it. But it's a good decision. Gibson, tomorrow we are also having another Navi moment at the courts where we're expecting some of the directions in regards to the Finance Act. So right now, we are not using the Finance Act that we were supposed to be using from 1st of July. So what exactly is happening? Are we still on default that we are using the former 2022-2023 Financial Act? Finance Act.
Yes. I think what the position is that the court said that we cannot be able to implement the Finance Act as already signed into law till the 5th, which is tomorrow, when all the parties will have come to court, and then the court will be able to hear them. Each side will be able to give their side of the story, and the court will be able to give directions. Either it will give directions whether it can allow it can give interim orders to say that maybe let the act be implemented, or maybe it will say let's have now clear directions to the effect that let's go into a full hearing and then we'll be able to decide. So there will be conservatory orders again to still stop the act from being effected. So that is where we are. The situation which we are in, which I think you put to Mheshimiwa earlier about EPRA, I think it's really very wrong for arms of government to defy the law. They can actually be cited for contempt, because that goes against the grain of what we are or what we need to establish our nationhood. To continue taxing Kenyans on something which the court has said that there needs to be a stay is very wrong. That is what I can say, because as we stand now, the act should not be implemented till we hear what the court says tomorrow.
All right.
On the other side, if you may just allow me to also jump into the issue of the climate justice summit which is happening in Kenyatta. In September, our president, when he was sworn as in August, was it in August when he was sworn, he was very deliberate on one of the very first things he elected was a global climate summit. Justice Summit on Climate Change, which is, I think, happening in September. And we saw him attend the Paris celebrations on that. That is something which is dear to his heart, and I will want to encourage him to go on that particular trajectory, and then we will be the leaders in that particular. Currently, there's a lot of money in the climate change. If we can be able to tap into those monies, we can be able to really be able to support our economy. And I think the president has received advice and has since seen it fit. Being a scientist, I think, is something which resonates around his reasoning, and he's been able to tap into it. And the aspect that we need to now start teaching Kenyans, even as young as university students, to be climate smart is something which we can be able to really count as Kenyans. That is something we are leading. As Mheshimiwa said, 92% of our grid is green. We could do more. By 2030, we have aspirations of closing it at 100%. But then, of course, we also need to look at other aspects in terms of trying to ensure that however much this grid is green, we need to make it something which is sustainable in terms of how much it costs. So that is an area, I think, which we have not been able to work around it. However much we will have a very 100% green, but still expensive, to not serve Kenyans.
All right.
We need to cut down on the pricing.
All right. Now we have like 5 minutes, gentlemen, but Mheshimiwa, I would like you to weigh in on the planned Azimio protest on Friday. And still on that, remember, they were protesting a number of things, and now they have decided to use what Kenya Kwanza was campaigning with, the cost of living, as a tool or as fodder for preparations for the Fridays, the Sabasaba protest. Right now, if you ask me, the last Azimio protest, and compared to what they are planning, they could end up having a lot of Kenyans who are supporting what they are talking about, because it resonates with what they are having right now. Case in point is EPRA. Somebody was doing some mathematics yesterday and said, since when EPRA decided we are going to, since 1st to the 5th, when the case tomorrow will be heard, they will have pocketed about 600 million more than what we should have paid. But anyway, Mheshimiwa.
Ben, thank you again. I want to thank the viewers for this opportunity that we've had. But I want to just comment on this issue of Sabasaba, which is coming up on Friday. The former Prime Minister, Raila Amolo Odinga, knows better. He knows that any government that is coming in, that is new, needs time to be able to implement its plan, to be able to bring the country together. Especially this Kenya Kwanza government took over when there was so much, when they came into office with a lot of challenges. And as such, he has not, first of all, come into terms to accept that we have a new president. He is still continuing to say that we need to go to demos, and he has tried as much as possible. He has come to this, we've had some people on the streets several times, but some way, somehow, it is not catching. Now he's trying to use this Sabasaba day to now say that, you see, we told you, the court has ruled on this, we told you this was wrong. But I want to assure Kenyans, we need to have a candid discussion amongst ourselves. We have to agree one thing, that for us to move forward as a nation, there are some things that we have to do. And one of those things is actually to face that we have to stop borrowing the money and we have to generate our own income. As much as we hate paying taxes, that is the only way this country can be able to stand on its feet and be able to pay its debts and to be able to run as a nation. And as such, I want to also challenge the Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga that by just telling the people to stop paying taxes, by challenging the people not to just buy fuel, by challenging the people, this is a nation for all of us. This is Kenya for all of us. These same people that you're challenging them not to just pay taxes, not to pay fuel, where is this country going to go? And you know for sure nothing is going to change moving forward. His Excellency President William Samoei Ruto will continue as the president of this country, and as such, calling for such a huge movement on Friday just for the Sabasaba. You have to think beyond yourself, because this is being selfish. We have to think beyond ourselves and think of the interest of this old nation to make sure that Kenya, even after Friday, will continue being governed, will continue to have peace, we will continue to see traders continuing to do their business, but not to disrupt the economy of the country, not to disrupt the rule of the country and the peace that we are enjoying.
All right. Gibson, we are wrapping it up, so kindly your final thoughts.
I like the gusto with which Njue has brought that attack on Raila. I think it's very but I like also the Kenya Kwanza when it comes to Raila, they really come out in the
yeah, but I saw a letter yesterday sent by one of the chair of the bipartisan talks. Maybe we could have they could resume, and maybe we could avoid a lot of destruction of properties and things that we see in Mandamanos.
Let me comment on the issue of Raila first and then come to the issue of the bipartisan. For Raila, I think he's just doing that which he's supposed to do because he's an opposition politician, so to make government uncomfortable. And I think he's achieving that a lot because when Raila is mentioned before, Kenya Kwanza, member of parliament, they come out very strong to attack him. And I like that because it means he's trying to give them the right energy. He has given them the right incentive to actually feel uncomfortable. And that's what opposition should be able essentially to do. But how he's doing it is really, the apparatus he's using is really things which are at his disposal and which are constitutionally guaranteed. So maybe the discussion should be, is it really for Kenyans? Does he really carry the Kenyan spirit in that particular aspect? That is something we need to appreciate and say whether that is the way he should be able to do it or not. But what the reality is that the life has become very difficult for Kenyans, and people will want to look for a way of venting against government. And if they use the opportunity that Raila has said there's Mandamano, they join in, not necessarily they are supporting him. They could they want just to be out there for their voice to be heard, because the alternative is that you go to parliament, which parliament the numbers were vanquished because Kenya Kwanza has the majority. So that is a form of, it's part of our Kenyanhood. Even when Mandamano was very much illegal back in, it's what gave us the constitution or the drive to have a new constitution. So that having said that, I will also want to say that the other aspect of the bipartisan talks is something which I think I really feel that there are some jokes being played around there. Because we need to really deliberate on a clear framework on how we're supposed to be able to steer this country forward and have peace. Because without peace, the situation which we are in as a country, Mheshimiwa said, a lot of debt and a lot of some of these issues could be well ironed in a very formal environment which can be able to give us a way forward. So if need to be, we need to get back to the bipartisan and then give it all the support we need. I feel all sides are trying to speak from both sides of the mouth, and they're not achieving much.
Thank you indeed so much. We have come to the end of the show, and I've been having two gentlemen here. Thank you indeed so much for joining us. Abraham Kirwa, who is the MP for Mosop, and also we have Gibson Gisore, who is the advocate of the High Court and also a leadership and governance expert. Thank you so much for joining us. We were putting things into perspective, and more specifically on the court's decision in regards to the CAS's appointments by the president. Tomorrow we are also expecting some activities at the courts where we are expecting the mention of the case in regards to the Finance Act. I'm Njue. Susan Thuku is a sign language interpreter for this live program.
Means he has been making a fool of me while showing me the face of a righteous and respectable man. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, that's right.
What do you want? Hey, where do you think you're going? Las Bandidas.
Hey, Sarah, I know you're hearing me. Hey, you're my favorite boy. You bring such joy. I don't need another lover. I don't even have to bother. I'm sorry, but I'm leaving you. I never wanna see you again. Hello from the other side. I must have called 1,000 times to tell you I'm sorry.
لاجل ما يحقق احلام ليله السفر قعدنا نتكلم بالساعات قالوا لي بص قدامك ما تبصش للي فات
مين الله هو